Hi there, how are you doing?
Good. Good to be here.
And I just finished your book this morning and I didn't expect to read your book and then be so inspired by your personal growing up story because I was home and all my friends have mansions and cottages and boats, and then I'm reading about how you lived with your parents in the apartment and they had the mattress sawed in half and all the setbacks you had. And I would encourage anyone to read your book. This You need to write your own book just about that, I think.
Yeah, it was like I don't know how to describe it other than trauma. Like growing up was not easy. My dad was sick, which is one of my big drivers and motivators, and he was a brilliant guy, in terms of his capacity. He just didn't have the health to work. And so we grew up, and eventually he just kind of gave up. And I grew up in poverty in the middle of a very wealthy, flourishing city called Vancouver, where everyone around me in the neighborhood I was in was a lot of wealth, and I happened to be in this one little ghetto in the middle of it. Very interesting childhood, let's say that.
Yeah. Do you ever give people advice? I hear a lot I live in the Middle East and I'm at home, and this has nothing to do with menopause, but I'm just curious because
Yeah.
I hear a lot of people looking up and feeling inferior to what other people have. Like I was just in Toronto and it's all about the price of that house on the corner that sold for, that cottage sold for that. And I don't see a lot of it's not looking down, but I wonder if how you respond to this now, coming from where you've come from, this sort of keeping up with the Joneses. A lot of people are struggling. Like, how do you parse that?
So I've been through it all. I started, like we said, in deep poverty. I became entrepreneurial and was far ahead of my peers very early. So, not that it matters now, but multimillionaire in my early 20s, from like zero to that, right? And all of a sudden I was just like, call it leader in the community, to now where none of that matters. Now that if you've experienced it all and you start to do what we do, which is like I've in the healthcare industry, understand how broken it is, dealing with women every day and seeing how gaslit they are, and seeing the nonsense of like, yeah, it's your hormones, it's supposed to be screwed up, good luck, right? And being mission driven, money is just a byproduct of your work now. It's like it's automatic. If you're doing something meaningful and purposeful, the money is automatic. I don't even think about it anymore. In fact, we have a COO that runs the company, a lady named Tracy. I have no clue what's going on anymore, very intentionally, because I want to focus on the purpose. So it's gone from having zero to keeping up with the Joneses to, like you said, getting stuck in all that, to like, I don't even have a car right now. Yeah, my lease expired and I just didn't bother getting another one. It's like, I don't really need one. I'll take an Uber to the gym and I'll work. You
Oh,
know?
I love that. I listened to a podcast yesterday and I can't remember who it was. It was Lewis Howes, but the person on it was saying this is exact thing. Like when your work has purpose and you have purpose, the money often comes, but it's the money isn't the motivator. And that's
Yeah.
sort of, which I know when people don't have money, they say easy to say. But okay, so let's start out broadly because you talked about women being gaslit. The genetics piece isn't even the room. It isn't even in the doctor's office. It's not even in the city, right? It's just not even there. So I'm just sort of wondering, when you say women are being gaslit from your perspective, what do you mean?
So let's take it back to the root cause, because even medically, that's what we do is we think about root cause. So our current medical system, this chemical-based reactive system, is whatever we have access to is based on clinical research and what we call an evidence-based model, meaning that there's double-blind placebos, you have to prove it in a certain setting. That started happening early on when we got into this chemical-based medicine earlier last century. And the pharmaceutical companies realized that most of their denials were because women have a hormone cycle, a 28-day cycle, that disrupted their one-size-fits-all pill. And so they just removed them. They said, let's just not include them in trials. Then obviously that didn't work because half the population isn't included. So they said, okay, we'll just include postmenopausal women so that we can say we included women. And since then, that's what's been going on. Is whatever pill you take, whatever treatment you hear from your clinician, whatever they're taught in school, is based on research on men, and very specifically Western European men and postmenopausal women. That does not work for most of the world, and for specifically for women that are in a cycle. Um, and so healthcare sucks. And when you go to the doctor as a woman and you're saying, here's how I feel, and you're told a solution, assuming that you're just a man with no penis, it doesn't work. There's a lot of other considerations that need to be made. And that's where, studying genetics was an eye-opener for me, because I learned how this highly complex female hormone cascade that made things so difficult, because you have the follicular phase and the luteal phase, and the cycle just changes so much, and you change so much within the cycle. It's actually very simple. If I have your DNA, I know exactly what your body is doing with hormones on each day of the month, and I know what you need to do on each day of the month. The reason you can't sleep on day 1 is different than the reason you can't sleep on day 20. The exercise you need to do on the gym in day 5 is different than the exercise you do on day 10. So all of a sudden, this very gray area that was murky and, not fulfilling any female need is very, very black and white. It's very black and white and clear. And we've done this now with thousands of women.
That's when I read that in your book, it was like, that just, I wish I knew
Yeah.
all those years. So within the DNA, how much variation is there for women, would you say? Are you able to frame it from year to year?
Yeah, yeah. So the funny thing is, we didn't know going into it what we were going to find, because we believed what everybody else believed, is that we are all genetically unique. So how do you possibly make this scalable and have women access this knowledge when there's 4 billion different women on the planet? So what we learned unintentionally was that women sort of fit into one of 6 buckets hormonally. We didn't know that was going to happen. And I think medical literature still has no idea that this is true. This is something that we learned in our own research. So now when it comes to the problems and the solutions, it becomes a lot easier to deal with, because you fit into one of the 6 profiles or avatars. And I already know. Now, just by looking at you, I can tell you things about the genetics of your hormones, because I know what they mean. I know how it drives your hair and your skin and your body type and your personality. All of these, you cannot lie when it comes to DNA. It's hard coding that tells your cells how to do their jobs, and they're doing exactly what the coding says. So I can see it in your shoulders and your body type and everything, right? So now you fit into one of these 6 profiles. It's very easy to figure out. Here's your red flags. So DNA was misunderstood in how to use it as a tool. Well, we believed it's like BRCA gene. You have a 60% chance of breast cancer. That to me is nonsense. What it is okay, you have an elevated risk of not being able to fight cancer, because BRCA is a tumor suppressor. It's not a tumor causer. So you don't have the repair tool. We still need to figure out what causes the breast cancer. And it's not the same answer for every woman. Now, in those 6 buckets, some of the women have low to little risk, some have extreme risk, based on what they're doing with their hormones. What do they make? How much? What quality? The detox pathways that get rid of it. And now you can start to see in this bucket, if you have these habits, you're almost certain to get breast cancer. And if you have these habits, it's almost certain that you never will. And it sounds oversimplified, but it really is that simple.
And it is shocking to hear because, when I'm interviewing, the forward thinker in breast cancer, and he's telling me things like, 30% of breast cancer is risk is dealable with lifestyle modifications. It's what you're telling me is just like that's so simple.
Yeah.
That's just so simplified. How do you parse that? Like, how do we begin to even
Yeah.
how
So the way we do it is use your DNA not to look for a problem or solve a problem, but just to understand the biological functions that aren't efficient in your body. So what is DNA? It's an instruction that tells your cells what to do. It's a literal instruction manual. Every one of your 50 trillion cells has this manual, and it reads the manual constantly, but it reads it for the job it's supposed to do. So the liver cell reads the liver section, the heart cell reads the heart section. And within those codes, some of them aren't written properly. And if I go through your code and I find the pages that have spelling mistakes or errors, or even pages missing entirely, which is possible, then I know that's the priority. Here's the biological function that your body doesn't do well. We haven't yet spoken of a symptom or a disease or a problem. I know, for example, if I have a really good version of the CYP19A1 gene, for example, I just make way too much estrogen. So it's not only about bad, it's also about good. You may be overly efficient at something. You make too much estrogen, which is also a problem, or you don't make enough, which is a whole different problem. Now I know if I'm in the I don't make enough or I'm in the too much bucket, those are different problems. So now I can be more precise about, first of all, what's the priority? Okay, I don't make enough estrogen, so fertility might be an issue, hair and skin might be an issue. I don't have the hips and body type that I want. It depends what problems you're trying to solve. Uh, Too much estrogen, maybe like I have mood issues, fibromyalgia, endometriosis. I have anxiety problems certain days of the month. When I train, I get injured too easily on certain days of the month. So different problems. It's knowing what to prioritize. It's not the one size fits all. Let me go read a female health book because maybe 2 or 3 out of the 10 things you read actually apply to you. It probably really worked for that author. It probably really worked for that podcaster or YouTuber or influencer, whoever you're listening to. And that's why they're so adamant about telling you. But ask them their story, and they probably spent 3, 4, 5, 10 years trialing and erroring all these different things before they found that thing that really worked, which they now think is the solution. Right? So if you are genetically them, it probably is true for you also. If you're genetically not them, it's going to fail. You're like, that person doesn't know what they're doing. They're a scam. Really, what we need to say, and this is everybody's journey, right? Really, what you need to know is genetically, here's who I am. Here's what I need to focus on and prioritize. And it's very clear which one of these 10 influencers is the person that I need to then connect with, because that's my story.
Perfect.
Right?
Yeah.
And then you got the problem solved. You got the problem. You don't need to have the problem because you're dealing with the root cause.
Right. And you know that the things out of all the smorgasbord of everything that's available to us that's so confusing, you can cut through what,
Yes.
like, because in your book, I should say, you go through all your own personal results, and then you go through your own personal recommendations, making it very clear these are recommendations for me. Don't take fenugreek if you don't need to, or whatever. But even in reading that, you dropped all these, you talk about hormones a lot. And just as a woman growing up in the 80s and 90s, trying to change my curvy body shape into a muscular, ripped body shape with women's health on the fridge, I just had this tremendous feeling of relief reading, as you talked about. That was my DNA has made my body shape this way, right?
Yep.
And that's why you're saying you can look at me and you can know certain things about me.
Yeah, you're more estrogenized, which is your superpower, right? So there's some people that are having the opposite problem. Like, I want to deadlift 400 pounds, but I can't. So you may have a challenge getting the definition, but you're probably pretty strong, right? And it's probably easier for you to lift big, heavy things. And that's estrogen. And that's a misconception that, oh, strong men, testosterone. No, the big, bulky guy that can deadlift and bench press a lot, that's estrogen. That's what gives you that mass and the strength. But it also, if you don't have enough testosterone, prevents you from seeing that striated, ripped muscle fiber that maybe is what you want. So now there's two ways to look at this. Here's who I am. So let me have a goal that aligns to who I am. Or here's who I am. So now I know exactly what to do to get to my goal. If it is that, yeah, I still want to have that ripped six pack and that's what I want, even though I know who I am, it's not about calories and exercise. It's about hormones. So I need to take a supplement that slows down my estrogen metabolization. That's it. That's my problem. I can run on as many treadmills as I want. I will never see my six pack because my hormones will keep fighting back and storing fat. So that's the problem to solve. So again, it depends what your goal is. There's no right or wrong answer. It's like, oh, now I know who I am, so I'm going to be the best version of that. Or like, now I know who I am, so now I know the shortcut to how to get to what I want. Both answers are right as long as they're healthy.
Okay, I'm going to get back to women who are cycling and asking you about that. But I'm just wondering, for you, when you started to figure this piece out, did it help you figure out who you are in a larger sense?
Yeah, the biggest aha moment for that was my brain, mood and behavior. So I would think the two things that we know better than most when it comes to genomics is hormones, because most people don't look at hormones in the genetic industry because you can't look at a single gene and say anything. You have to understand the full cascade, the net result. So that's, and plus we studied so many women that we get it. And the second thing that we know really well, better than most, is everything about your executive function, the way you think. Why? Because we sat in front of 7,000 people, one by one by one, to speak to them and study them and understand how they behave. And that was a major aha moment for me. And what I've learned is all these words like anxiety, depression, procrastination, burnout, the negatives are actually your superpower, but you're in the wrong context. And I'll use myself as an example. There are innate chemical imbalances. There's innate depression. There's innate anxiety. That's a tiny fraction of the people that complain and use these words, right? The majority is chronic and developed and does not need to happen, especially when it comes to women and you intersect hormones with that. So for me, there's a gene called DRD2 that determines how dense the dopamine receptors are in your brain. So dopamine is that chemical that allows you to experience pleasure, eating something tasty, or reward, achievement, right? So that reward seeking behavior. It's very hard for me to feel because I have the lowest possible density. There's a gene called MAO that then metabolizes the dopamine, and there's a gene called COMT that then sweeps away that broken up metabolite, brings you back to normal. I have the lowest possible receptor, so hard for me to feel, and I have the fastest possible MAO and COMT. So I hardly feel it and it hardly lasts. So my default state is depression because the world sucks. Nothing's good enough. I can't get no satisfaction. That's me.
Okay.
Or it's addiction because I find that thing that gives me the pleasure hit and dopamine is triggered and it's like, whoa, this is pretty good. And I do more and I do more and I do more. And I structure my day around it and it becomes like the hub of all my choices. That's addiction. Or it leads to achievement because I experience a reward and I can do better. I can do more. Whatever I did yesterday isn't enough. I'm going to take a bigger risk and a bigger risk and a bigger risk. And I have this crazy reward seeking behavior. Now, take a look at me. I've experienced all three of those, right? I have, at a very young age, been through addiction because a friend showed up with a birthday present that he shouldn't have. And I learned that there is pleasure to be found in this world. And so I became addicted, right? Then my father passed away. I had to take care of the family. I started working just completely flipped and I worked like an animal. And I one day sort of took a step back. I was like, wait a second, I have money. I went from object poverty to like, oh, I'm doing well. I have a team, I have staff, I have warehouses, I have trucks, I have everything, right? So I took a step back and I stopped trying and I got depressed because I either need the reward or the pleasure and I was getting neither.
Wow.
The day to day is not enough for me, right?
Wow.
Then I found what I'm doing now. And like I got depressed, I got sick, I had a whole bunch of things go on, stopped taking care of myself. And I started getting that reward again that, oh, I just helped this person. I just got my arthritic mother out of bed and she's going to the gym now, right? Like that actually happened. I got my friend off of cholesterol pills and those micro rewards. And so I started my reward. And again, I realized that's why I was so entrepreneurial earlier on because I took these crazy, stupid risks that nobody would take. So context was key. Your genetic wiring is usually a gift when it comes to your mood and behavior. If you're not in the right context, you may not be finding the total value of that gift. You may not be manifesting who you are. And instead, you're manifesting words like anxiety and depression because you're misaligned for what you're wired for. And now, if I have your DNA, I can tell you whether you should be an accountant or a lawyer or an entrepreneur, or should you not see blood as a doctor because you hold on to trauma, or should you not work on a team because you give things too much meaning and you may be too much disruptive and you'll be a drama queen and maybe you should be the scientist in the lab that just, literally to that degree. All the neurochemicals that drive everything that you feel and think, we understand them. And so, yeah, that really unpacked for me who I am on a completely different level. And now I use it to my advantage.
That is powerful. Okay. I feel like you could even test kids and figure out what sport to put them in.
Yeah, I've
Yeah.
done that with my kids,
Wow.
right? So I've done that not only for their sports, for the academics. I know who they're wired to be, and I know what they should aim for. I know how they're they uniquely metabolize different foods and why their food needs to be a little bit different.
Okay.
Between three of them, two of them need one thing and one needs something else, right? One of them is the worst possible metabolizer of starches and has a horrible insulin response. And so now take this as an example. This kid was a crazy drama queen when it came to homework. He would kick and scream on the floor, yell, throw books. And you start to think drama queen, no motivation, bad attitude, all of the labels of like behavioral problems. His problem was not his behavior. His problem was that he cannot metabolize starch at all. And he has the worst possible insulin response. And homework in our home was done after dinner. And he was literally in a coma in a South Asian home where we ate rice every day. So literally, you put this kid in a coma and ask him to do homework. He can't even function, right? Everyone here has experienced a carb crash at some point. Imagine doing that every day right before going to work.
No.
And now imagine now the teacher telling us he has ADHD and all of these words that would have been used, that which none of them are true. It was just a metabolic issue. And now he doesn't have that problem. Yes, there's some degree of the habits that he had, which we're unpacking, but the root is gone, right? The acute problem is gone. And so now he can start to revive and fix that.
Wow. Uh, I'm blown away. Okay, so let's go to women. They get the DNA testing, and at the end, I'm going to ask you the specifics about how you do that testing.
Okay.
But they get the testing, 30 or 25, ideally earlier, but whatever. They figure everything out. They figure out what bucket they're in. Everything's flowing. Everything's thriving. Are those women going to have trouble when they hit perimenopause?
Yeah, so what the way we look at genetics is your DNA doesn't change. So your DNA, that's the card you've been dealt, that's who you are. Now, how you use it, again, is based on context. What problem are you trying to solve? So the problem you're trying to solve when you're 13 is not the same as when you're 40. So you're going back to that same instruction manual to say, here's how my body works. Now I'm fixing perimenopause. And fixing perimenopause usually starts before perimenopause.
That's what I'm trying to get at. Like,
Yeah.
I think a lot of people are entering perimenopause like broken down golf carts and then, or, with all sorts of bad habits. And I'm just wondering if difficulty in perimenopause has a genetic component or if like how much you could see or part, like,
Sure. There's a genetic component for how you're going to feel. There's some women are like, yeah, menopause, I didn't even notice, right? And then there's some women like a crazy roller coaster from hell. So why the variability? There's two things, your genetic profile, who are you? Are you more estrogen dominant? Are you more estrogen toxic? Then yeah, it might be a little rough. Are you more androgenized? And maybe there were some other challenges you had, but this may not be a problem for you, right? So that's answer one. Answer two is your epigenetics. What are the choices you make that put you in the state that you're in? So you could be estrogen dominant, you could be estrogen toxic, but have you also surrounded yourself by estrogen mimicking chemicals and plastics and foods and Teflon coated frying pans and all the things that load that fire and fuel it? Then it's going to be much, much, much worse, right? So there's now over 100 menopause symptoms when there used to be a dozen, and then there was 30, and then there was 40. And it's not because these are symptoms of menopause, it's because we are in such a dysbiotic state. The body is so unhealthy that everything is getting triggered, right? When the hormones get out of balance, you're already on the tipping point for inflammation and mood issues and weight issues, and then this just pushes everything over the edge. So those are not menopause symptoms. Those are menopause being the catalyst for everything that was already about to tip over, right? So understand that the terrain, you have to think of perimenopause and menopause as a terrain issue. The body head to toe needs to be in its best possible state. And that starts with, okay, so what puts me into my bad state? What genetic functions aren't doing well? What do I prioritize and focus? Is it because of the things that I breathe? Is it because of the things that I eat? Is it because of the things I'm putting in my skin? Maybe a combination of all of those things. What do I focus on? Why do I not feel well? And if I remove all that and reduce the load, then all of a sudden the body is thriving. And then when I get into perimenopause and menopause, it's not that bad. Right. And then that's layer one. Layer two is now if I also work on the hormone side and understand who I am and what my threats are there, that's another layer of chipping away and making it not that bad. And if I optimize these two buckets, menopause should be a breeze, right? Technically should be a breeze. So take a look at, for example, I'll give you like a practical example. Women in Japan don't have hot flashes. They have a frozen shoulder. That's like the biggest menopause symptom. And it has to do with what they eat and what they breathe and their relationships and things that are just triggering a different biological problem. So it gives you an example of you are in control. North American women get a hot flash because of what you eat and what you're exposed to, et cetera, et cetera. So let's start cleaning all that up and deal with the hormones. And peri and post should be a breeze.
The other thing reading your book that struck me was we genetically are at different levels of being able to process the toxins that we're exposed to. So that's why someone can sit in an office that's being painted and be fine, and someone that can get sick.
Yeah.
Right? That's a big key, because that's why another reason maybe why some people reach perimenopause and menopause and have a harder time.
For sure. And today the use of chemicals is more prolific than ever. And so it's very hard to escape. Even the things that are supposedly clean, like your garden, it's full of pesticides and chemicals and things that were not meant to enter your body. In your home, if you're not sleeping on an organic mattress, you're breathing in fire retardants for 8, 9 hours. You may be sleeping on memory foam, and every time you roll over, you're popping little gas bubbles that are off gassing that you're breathing in. And now, depending on the genetics of your detox capacity, what does that mean for you? It might mean nothing. It might mean migraines and eczema, right? Because you just can't deal with the inflammation caused by that toxic insult. And just understand that our DNA in its current form, who we are as humans, is about 250,000 years old, right? So that's when we became who we are. And if you look at the habits of our ancestors and today's reality started in the 1970s. The food and chemicals, right? It was there before, but the total usage and the like, it's just everywhere. That started in the 1970s. This like 50 years versus 250,000 years of habits we're wired for. That's who we are. We are still cave people, right? Our genetics haven't changed. So our body still assumes that we get out in the sun all day, that we eat clean things that we just plucked out of the ground or just stabbed with a knife, that we walk on the ground and ground ourselves, that we are like, so all of those habits are what we are designed for. But what are we actually doing? Toxic soup, right? Everywhere. Relationships, sleep, food, breathing, everything.
Yeah.
So we're not wired for it. So you either need to cut it out, which is hard sometimes, or supplement to support the jobs that your body doesn't do well to be able to cope with all this additional exposure.
Okay, so I'm very curious. The narrative in the menopause and perimenopause space is largely, in the allopathic side, is largely you need, your estrogen goes away, you need to replace your estrogen, and you need to do it as soon as possible to the time of menopause. In your framework, what do you think of that?
So I go back to the same thing as always. It's just personalization. The benefit they're talking about is there. But if you do not personalize, you can give someone breast cancer. Right? If you do not personalize, they can have the opposite outcome. We are not all the same. Like we said, women fit in multiple buckets. So, and where do you intervene? What do you give? So typically when you go get hormones, you're given estradiol, which is a form of estrogen. It's a more potent version of estrogen. Some women, there's a gene that determines how much 4-hydroxyestrogen you make. So there's estrogen, and then before you clear it or get rid of it, metabolize it, it converts into either 2, 4, or 16-hydroxyestrogen. And 4 and 16 are toxins that are known to fuel things like breast cancer if there's too much.
Also, fibroids and
Yeah, endometriosis, all of these female health mysteries are actually not mysteries. They're fueled by estrogen toxicity.
And this is estrogen. When we speak about this broadly, this is estrogen detoxifying. It's how do you, what are the terms? Is this
Yeah,
estrogen pathways? How do we
it's kind of
describe?
three buckets. It's estrogen dominance. What do you make?
Mhm.
What version? Estrogen, testosterone, etc. Then there's estrogen metabolism. What quality do you make? How toxic is it? Then there's estrogen detoxification. Now that we know what you made, how well do you eliminate it? Right. So between these three buckets is those six profiles I was talking about. So now, if you are that woman that's estrogen dominant, estrogen toxic, and does not detoxify well, then you are not the woman, if especially if you're going down that 4-hydroxy pathway. If I give you estradiol, the gene that converts your estrogen into 4-OH, the toxic stuff, also takes your estradiol that I just gave you and turns it into that. So I'm basically giving you an ingredient for breast cancer and ovarian cancer and Alzheimer's and cardiovascular disease. So the thing that you're trying to prevent, you're actually causing. But medical literature, I understand why doctors do this because estrogen is good for you. But we have to be more precise. There's estradiol, there's estriol, estrone. So what do you actually need? Estriol maybe isn't as potent. You're not going to get the benefit, but you're not making yourself sick. So there's some women that's what you need to do. You need to just have a little bit less of the benefit, but none of the risk. Or you can say, well, okay, I want the estradiol, um, but I'm just going to support my detox pathways so that I don't cause the inflammation. Okay, there's another solution. So all in all, what we're saying is before considering adding hormones, understand that if you add this, it doesn't necessarily stay as this. There's genes that convert it to other things. And that's where the clinicians aren't trained. They don't know that that's what's happening. They think if I gave you testosterone, your testosterone numbers went up. Well, if I have the fast CYP19A1 gene, I'm converting it all into estrogen, right? We deal with NHL hockey players here in Toronto who come to us complaining of man boobs, gynecomastia, right? Because their trainers are giving them androgel packs. It's like this gel that you put on your stomachs, and testosterone enters your bloodstream. But if you just convert it into estrogen, all I've done is given you fuel for more estrogen. And then the problem you're trying to solve, you're actually doing the converse to that and making it worse. So we just have to be specific. I think everybody can potentially do it. You just have to do it right. And you could potentially avoid major headaches and accelerate the benefit you're trying to seek.
Well, that is very mind blowing. Excuse me, that is very mind blowing. And I wonder, there's a big debate and discussion every time that there's mixed results on hormone therapy, right? Like there was just a study that said it caused dementia. And there's a big outcry and everyone's debunking that study because they don't like it because it's saying something that they don't believe. But also, watching, I think there needs to be a split between the kind of hormone therapy, like progestin versus progesterone. But the piece you're mentioning really explains the mixed results.
Yep. That's why some women got dementia, and we can predict that. It's true, but the other women are also correct. No, it doesn't.
Yeah.
It doesn't cause that, right? So how do you argue that? Because the evidence, the anecdotal evidence is pretty solid. You have to personalize that study, and that's what's missing, right? This is what's always been missing from female health is the personalization according to the unique female cycle, which is different in different women.
Do you get ripped apart by the medical community for saying things like this?
So anytime I start, it always starts with show me the data, show me the publication, show me the, and I was like, that's exactly what we don't do. We don't do evidence-based studies to depersonalize the most personal thing we have. We use anecdotal N of one data. How did I fix your problem? And how did I fix your problem? And how did I fix your problem? Now I need to find 100 other U's and also solve their problem the same way. And it always starts with you don't know what you're doing, you don't know what you're talking about, this is evidence-based. And I was like, yeah, I don't want it to be evidence-based because that's what's going to destroy it. And eventually when they hear it, it's like, this is why my practice sucks. This is why I'm depressed. This is why I don't like practicing medicine. And all of the waterfalls start. Literally, I've been at conferences where I get on stage to speak in front of a bunch of oncologists. And you're like, who is this moron? Where are your titles? There's no letters next to your name. And you can see it in their faces. And then I start to talk, and then people start crying because they realize that they cause breast cancer in their patients. This has happened over and over and over and over again. So there's this hunger in the clinician community. They know that their arms are tied and they just can't do what they want to do, but they don't know what to do. They don't know what their toolkit is highly limited. Um, and so there's this hunger now, and this is why you have functional medicine and integrated medicine, and you have MDs that no longer will take insurance, that only want cash pay because they just can't do what they know they need to do. That wave is getting bigger and bigger and bigger now.
And this is also why you have the demonization. You have doctors coming on and saying, if your doctor starts talking about estrogen dominance, it's not real. It's not,
Yeah.
there's a lot of that on social media. And it's so confusing for women because already they might learn a little bit over here. And then you have a very confident doctor over here saying, that's
Yep.
nonsense. And they're doing a bunch of expensive testing and you don't need that. And so what is a woman supposed to do who's just at the front of this is just sort of like, if they're listening to this podcast and being like, Anne-Marie, no, I thought I had it all figured out.
Yeah. I mean, the simple thing is, how do you feel, right? Do you feel great? Then keep listening to your doctor. If there's something wrong, why can't they fix it? If you're on pills for something that you weren't born with, that's not innate, you should not need to have it. You developed it. It was caused. And if somebody that you're working with as your quarterback cannot tell you why you have it, but only what it is, they're the wrong person. There are plenty of people out there now that can tell you functional medicine, integrated medicine, naturopaths. They know why these things happen. All we're saying is we can accelerate that journey by getting straight to the point of you, right? We have clinicians, we have a whole clinician team now that's been trained because we realize that, okay, we do the testing and people are like, can you help me? Right now that I figured out this new version of myself, what do I do with all this information? So we developed a clinician team to be able to do that type of work. But that's what I would say is, like, when somebody comes to me with a genetic test from some other big company and says, well, these guys have sold 3 million tests. Like, how many people did they help? Right? I've sat at Sick Kids Hospital in an autism study where a charity gave Sick Kids Hospital $8 million to research and find the cure, quote unquote. What's that genetic switch that we're going to turn on or off? They had spent six of the $8 million at the point that I met them. And I came in with some functional thinking, showing them how I've been able to reverse autism in certain kids and predict and prevent it in others. And they're like, yeah, but that's not evidence-based is what we're working on. And my simple question to them was, you spent $6 million. How many lives have you changed so far? And they said, well, zero. And I said, why? They said, well, we haven't found the answer yet. I was like, there's an answer right here. That's what 90% of people need. You're trying to solve the genetic condition, which is a tiny fraction. It's actually less than 10%. It's probably 2 or 3%. The majority of what we deal with is chronic. It's caused, it's developed. The very tiny fraction is innate, a genetic condition that you're born with. And medical practice treats everything like that, like it's something you have, right? And so we see it over. So just understand that if you weren't born with it, you don't have it. Chronic disease is a choice. The pace at which you age is a choice. The energy levels you have, the libido, the hair, the skin is all a choice if you understood what drives all of these problems.
Wow. And this is so heartening because one of the things that's really depressing about the menopause conversation is so many people are drawing a direct line between menopause and disease.
Yeah.
Like it's just like I think there's people who think I hit menopause and I get diseased. And you described it as you get to this point and there's a tipping point of everything that's going on. But it's not menopause causing disease. It's
Oh,
all of this other stuff. Okay.
no. No.
Yeah. That's quite something. Well, you are definitely an outlier and I'm super impressed. So explain how it works if someone wants to get this done, exactly what they would do.
Yeah, so even that, we've tried to make it as easy as possible. So me coming in as an outsider, it wasn't easy to use genetic testing. Like, it was a different language, like it was like gibberish basically. And when I went to like PhDs and doctors to say, here's my report, what does it mean? They didn't know. Like, they're not trained on this stuff. And so I realized one big thing for me was building something that it was designed the way I wished it was when I first got sick. Easy to use. right? I don't need to know the genetics and what, I don't even need to know my genetic report. What version of what genes do I have? I need to know what's wrong and how do I fix it? That's it. Tell me what to do. It should be that simple. And if it's not, the product doesn't work. So in terms of how you use it, very simple. A kit gets shipped to you, you spit in a tube. So it's saliva. We try to make it easy. We got away from blood because this way you can do it at home. Your kids can do it, right? You just spit in a tube. That tube goes back to our lab. It can be shipped for 6 months and have no problem. We can get stuck somewhere on the way, no issues. Our lab then extracts the DNA from the cells in your saliva and we sequence it. And what that means is we read your genetic code. So what version of the genes do you have? The ones that we think are important. We don't look at most of the genome because we don't think a lot of it is relevant to your health journey. We then, from there, interpret it in our unique way, meaning that I can take that same DNA and put it into a 23andMe or one of many other platforms and give you a report, but it's not going to tell you all of what we know. We interpret it differently. And that's, I would say, the number one thing that we do that's different is what do we think it means? Very different than what geneticists think it means because we've studied those 7,000 people. We then give you access to a portal, which is not a report per se. It is a whole bunch of systems that you can look at, from mood and behavior to diet to sleep to hormones to longevity to immunity. So all these sections, and within them, there's all these micro sections of anxiety, depression, weight, keto diet, etc. The things you need to know. And then we tell you for each one of those things, how efficiently is your body doing that? And if you're not doing well, here's the exact things to supplement, to add as habits, to remove as habits for this problem specifically, right? And with that, it becomes very easy to self-serve and just do it. If somebody has a clinical issue like, hey, my mom had Alzheimer's, I don't want that. Or like, I just can't lose these last 10 pounds. I'm stuck. It doesn't matter what I do. We do have a clinician team that can execute clinical programs for people. For the most part, the genetic report will tell you how to be the best version of yourself. But if it is a crazy menopause, if it is like a horrible acne issue or mood or whatever, then you may consider working with a functional genomics practitioner to just dive a little deeper for you.
Okay, so it's not one of these things you subscribe to every month, like so many things are these days. It's a one-time thing that will give you a look. And then if it's complicated, you can get extra help.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Wow, that is something else. Well, thank you very much for speaking to me about it. I was really laughed when you talked about gray hair, because one thing going around social media now is that it's a copper deficiency, and you talked all about hydrogen peroxide and how we process that.
Yeah.
And I get nervous about seeing copper deficiency because it's like, I hope people don't start taking copper.
So once again, both answers are true,
Okay.
but which one is it for you, right? It is true that if you're deficient in copper, it's bad for hair, it's bad for a lot of stuff, right? By the way, 14-year-old son, I put him on a copper supplement because he had a white hair, and I knew based on his genetics that it had nothing to do with hydrogen peroxide and oxidation. And I knew that based on his stubborn, ignoring of his vegetables, that he wasn't getting enough minerals. So I gave him some minerals, not just copper, but a mix of minerals. And guess what? His joint pain went away. His recovery from his basketball training got better and faster. His mood changed, right? So these central system failures don't equal one symptom, they equal many.
And not one supplement sometimes, because that one supplement can also impact other minerals that you're taking. So if you're adding a whole bunch of one, yeah, okay. Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Pleasure. It was great speaking to you.
Listen, could I be an affiliate for you guys? Are you in the Middle East?
We do ship